Hi, this is Kizo, the IT guy. I will be talking about Azure Kubernetes Service AKS with Application Gateway and Web Application Firewall. This video will talk about provisioning the AKS and then how you can then put this behind an application gateway, which can also be upgraded to the Web Application Firewall, implementing the application gateway and Web Application Firewall for the Kubernetes cluster. You use the Azure AKS to deploy. To do that, you would need to have an understanding of deploying Kubernetes cluster, uh, an understanding of load balancing, an understanding of setting up application gateway in Azure and web application firewall. I would assume that this you already know a bit of that. If you haven't, please go through the Azure application gateway documentation for a bit of understanding. Uh, I will be using two methods to expose your containerized app to the internet. You can use various ways, three basically. With the Kubernetes cluster, the Azure AKS, you can spring up an external load balancer, which will just give you a public IP address, and then that is straight off to the internet, and then you can configure how you want to do it. You can also spring up an internal load balancer with your AKS, and then you will then redirect that traffic to an external endpoint, where your internal load balancer would be the backend of whichever method you use to expose it to the internet. I'll be using the application gateway to expose my containerized app to the internet through the load balancer that will be created from the Kubernetes services. And to do that is to either use the internal load balancer or the external load balancer. You would get the same result. The difference is your external load balancer is pointing straight to the internet, and if anybody gets hold of that IP address, you are at a security risk, except you know how to configure a mode security for your ingress controller, which you can also deploy in the Kubernetes service or the Kubernetes cluster itself. I will be using the Azure Portal to leverage on the WAF and the application gateway. When I say WAF, is the web application firewall that Azure has already provisioned. And even talking about the pass, I just want to leverage the service. So I would add my load balancer, whether it's internal or external, as backend to an application gateway, and then that will secure my application service. Uh, so that is one method of doing that. The other method is also using the application gateway as well. But how you configure your application gateway is what makes the difference. Some of your apps, how you configure your apps, one method will work, the other would not work. But I will take you through the method one and the method two of setting up your application gateway. The method one, you will be setting up the cluster itself. You would then create your application gateway in a different VNet. Your Kubernetes cluster will have its own VNet that is generated from when you deploy your Azure AKS command, and you would then need to now set up a different VNet for your application gateway, and then you pair the VNets, and then you had the uh, IP address of your load balancer, whether it's internal or external, in this case, internal load balancer, and then you had it as a backend to the application gateway. And once you pair that, that will then be able to route traffic to the load balancer and then route the traffic into your containers. The other step is you will deploy the VNet. Sorry, you will deploy the application gateway and the VNet of the cluster itself, which makes life easier. I personally use this method to route traffic to my containers, Kubernetes cluster. I have created this resource group, which is my KHS, and when I created my container, whether you do it on the Portal or through your Azure CLI command with a few commands like mine here. You provision your subscription with a provider to run container services. You have to do that on Azure. AWS is a bit different. And then I created my resource group right there, which is creating the resource group. And then just for simplicity, I've used the name of my resource group to name my cluster as well. And that will create your uh, Kubernetes cluster. There are a bit more commands you need to do. You need to choose whether you're going to be using admin or a service principal. If you're going to be using a service principal, you need to add service principal credentials. But for security, I will not be putting that there. But please do get documentation on the full commands to deploy your AKS from command line. And then after that, you want to log on to your AKS, and when you do that, you want to ensure that you have the AKS CLI as well, which you also have the Kubernetes, which you have the kube control engine installed on your machine. If you don't have it, if you want to use any other uh, controller to operate your Kubernetes cluster, you can go ahead and do that. But for simplicity, I would use the kube control engine to run this, and it's just a few commands. I will be using the Azure voting app to run this presentation. You can go into Azure documentation and have a quick rundown of how to deploy a simple Azure voting app. It is very easy to do. It doesn't take much of it's a no-brainer. Just follow the guide and you can do that. I have done this before, as you can see. I've done here previously, but I will be just running the image of the Microsoft Docker engine directly just to save time. I have already Docker file from that particular website I just showed you. It would deploy an external load balancer. What I've done differently here is to add this annotation in my script. So it's just basically just these two lines that I've added. It says annotation, and then you turn on this uh, Azure Load Balancer internal, and then you turn that to true. By default, it is false because Kubernetes has that in. I've embedded that in the default settings. There's also a configuration for Google Cloud and for AWS as well. You just choose whichever it is for the provider that you're using to deploy your cluster, and then add that. Basically, that is the only thing I am changing. And I've also have another file, replicated file, exactly the same except for the name of the apps that I will be deploying. I've just added two just to separate the services that will be running in the Kubernetes cluster. So once the cluster is being created, you would have these resources in there. You can do more nodes, but I've just chosen one node for that, and it's created this resource for me. So now to set up the internal load balancer, you have to run the service. When I say run the service, your containers, you have to actually deploy them and then run the service that would then expose them to the external network from, like when I say external network, which is away from the Kubernetes DNS itself. Now we need to log into our cluster. So that's logged on, and I will then create the service. And then that will create the service. However, then check the get the service, and we still have a pending state, and that is because it's still creating the load balancer. I can do this just to watch it so that I would know when it's created the load balancer. This watch is just to check up updates on whatever is still running. Another way to do it, and that is done. Uh, Great. Now that we have the Kubernetes cluster running and the internal load balancer created, we will now create the app gateway in this resource group itself. As you can see, I'm still in that resource group, and this Azure resources is created by default. And then before I do that, I want to go into the Kubernetes cluster VNet, and then go into the subnet, and then create the gateway subnet. Or if you want to, if you have a CIDR block that you like to use, you go ahead and set that. I will leave everything as it is. If I want to have that sent connected also to any storage device, I'll do that there. But for the purpose of this video, I'll leave it at default and click OK. That will create the subnet. And what I now want to do is go back to that resources and then click on add, and then I type here gateway, application gateway, create, and I will create my just call it that simple name, and then I'll use the existing cluster resource group. Note please, this is not the resource group that the cluster belongs to. This is the resource group that the cluster created itself when it created the resources. And then click on OK. I've just mentioned that just in case you're automating it and you want to pass that into code, you want to make sure that you're getting the resource group that the cluster is generating, not the one that is generated. Then the VNet is the VNet of the cluster, and it will automatically pick up the subnets of the gateway subnet that I created the other time. And then you want to create an IP address, an external IP address. I'll just add the IP for clarity, and then others will be default. In this video, I would not be creating the WAF itself, but it is basically the same. You just need to click upgrade to WAF, and then that will create your WAF as it is. Click on OK, and then click on OK, and that will create the resources. It takes about 10-15 minutes to create the resources, so I'll just fast forward this video up to that point. Yeah, so that is now created. So what I would now need to do is to go into the app gateway, and then in the back end pool, we want to get a service. That will be this IP, and then add, and then save. This will also take a bit to actually update. So while that was creating, I have gone ahead to create another app gateway, which I'm going to use to set up the method one here, where I will be pairing the VNet of the Kubernetes cluster and pairing also with the app gateway. So to do that, I created this new resource group, which has just the app gateway, the external IP, and the VNet itself. And I've also created another Azure service and containers deployment, as the case may be. So you can see here that I have Azure boot back and Azure boot front and Azure boot back 2 and Azure boot front 2. So both of them have their front end and back end, and the two load balancers are that and that. And if you look on the resource group for the Kubernetes cluster itself, you would notice that there is just one internal load balancer here. Azure has been clever enough to actually just have that set up on the same load balancer, but two different front end uh, configuration, which now has the 5 and a 6 as .5 and .6. So this will then point to the service in the Kubernetes cluster itself. So that is the service of the Kubernetes cluster that is using the 0.6, and then the other is using the the not 0.5 for the load balancer. So the first one we created is the 0.5, and that is what I used as the backend for the first example that I'm doing here, where I created the VNet in the Kubernetes resource group. Now the other one is the VNet that is outside the Kubernetes resource group, and all I would need to do, so the other one is to use the resource group that is outside the application gateway, and I would need to then configure the backend of that application gateway itself, and I will do that, and that will be 6 and save. So that will also be saving. And for the, so I would, not to cause confusion, I will just leave this to run its course for now, and then come back to finishing up with testing out the app gateway for this one. Oh, fantastic! That is already saved. So all we need to do now is to then go to the public IP address of the app gateway and then do tests of that. And voila, that is our front end through the app gateway. That's So that is how we would configure the application gateway to talk to the load balancer. I've seen a lot of requests on the GitHub issues that have been raised with AKS that they're trying to achieve this. This is a way. I have also raised that issue and I did not get any assistance. So I actually have to come up with a solution for myself, and that seems to actually work fine. Actually, both method actually seems to work fine. So back to the other one, which is the app gateway that is sitting outside the resource group. All we now need to do is to pair the VNet. To do that, I would go to the virtual network for simplicity, and we have the two virtual network right there. This one, the first VNet is the VNet that has that is connected to the Kubernetes cluster, and all I need to do is to go into peering and then add a new peer. I would say peer to app gateway app, and I would select the resources and I would just select that, click OK. That is in peering. I will then go to the other resource group here, so to do the pairing, because you would need to pair both to talk to each other for uh, inbound and outbound connectivity itself. And then I'll call this pair to K8S cluster, and then choose the K8S cluster and click OK. So we've paired both VNets, and we've also added the uh, back end of the load balancer for our second container app to the application gateway of these resources. Then what we now need to do now is to go to the public IP address of the new IP address that we've done. So this is 17. This is the first one. You can see that's the first IP address that we've done, and I will then paste this. So I will do that, and that is there's an issue with that. What we need to do is to go into the VNet and go into the subnet of the app gateway, and what you want to do is to then route that to those and say, and then wait a couple of minutes for that to run, and you should be able to then get that, and that is now working. So basically what I've done with the one that is running on the external is, and the configuration of the subnet, you want to make sure that you choose the routing table of your Kubernetes cluster and add it to the external VNet or the remote VNet that you have paired to the VNet of the cluster itself. So you want them to belong to the same routing table. I've seen some people actually also configure the NSGs as well for that VNet as well, which is absolutely fine. It will still work the same, but for this demo, I've just left it at that. So we have the two voting app right there. So this is the .9 and the other is the .18, and as you can see, I will leave that as 18 and 7 just to separate them, and this is still at 5, and voila, that is how to configure your gateway or and web application firewall right in front of your Kubernetes cluster. I hope you enjoyed this video and is of use to you. If you like my video, please click the like button down there, and I'll be able to put more videos later in the future regarding DevOps tools, how to do DevOps tools, your normal DevOps automation pipeline, and so forth. I would in the future be putting on the GitHub page, where you will also find below in the comment of this video the automation pipeline, automation scripts to actually have this deployed as well. So thank you very much. Once again, this is your Kizo the ID guy. Please like my page. If you enjoyed the video and it's of use to you, you can drop a comment and have the discussion. Just drop a line in the comments below, and I would try as much as possible to respond to that. Thank you very much. Bye.